My heart didn't race. It dropped. Like a stone. They took it. They actually took it. I sat on the bed, tea sweating in my hand, and I understood. It wasn't just the will they stole. It was the part of me that believed I still mattered to him. But they're wrong if they think this is the end. I may be old. I may be quiet. But I remember everything. Before I begin my story, I just want to say thank you for listening to me pour my heart out. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love hearing from you. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me more than you know. Now, let me tell you what really happened. The August heat in Little Rock, Arkansas, clung to my skin like damp cotton as I stood on the sagging porch of my home in 2024, the keys to a used John Deere tractor heavy in my hand. I was 68, my joints stiff from years of kneading dough and hauling laundry, but my grip on those keys was firm. I'd spent 3 years saving for that tractor, skipping new shoes, letting my magazine subscriptions lapse, and leaving the TV's fuzzy screen unrepaired, all to give my son Theo, 32, the tool he needed for his farming startup. Since he was a boy, Theo had dreamed of his own land, sketching crop rows and irrigation plans in spiral notebooks, his eyes bright with ambition. I handed him the keys that morning, expecting a grin, maybe a quick embrace. But he just took them, muttered, "Thanks, Ma," and walked to his wife Claire's idling pickup, his steps heavy, like the gift was a chore. I smoothed my apron, its hem worn thin, and carried a tray of slow-cooked ribs to the backyard, where I'd set up for a family barbecue. The yard was modest, its grass patchy from Arkansas's clay soil, but I'd strung fairy lights across the fence and covered folding tables with checkered cloths, my hands busy since dawn. Guests arrived. Neighbors, choir friends, and a few of Theo's startup contacts, their voices blending with the hum of cicadas. Nina, Theo's business partner, swept in, her tailored blazer out of place in the humid haze, her smile sharp as she nodded at me, like I was the hired help. I arranged the ribs beside my peach cobbler, a recipe I'd honed over decades, and stepped back, hoping to blend into the crowd. But Theo's voice cut through, loud and performative, as he raised a glass. "Ma's always got us covered," he called out, grinning at the guests. "Nobody serves like she does." Laughter rippled across the yard, some clapping, others chuckling into their drinks. Nina caught Claire's eye, a quick nod passing between them, and Claire smirked, sipping her lemonade. My chest tightened, my smile frozen as I stood there, the cobbler dish still warm in my hands, my sundress feeling like a costume. Theo turned to a guest, already joking, leaving me in the echo of their amusement. I set the dish down, my fingers unsteady, and moved to the yard's edge, my breath shallow but my face composed. The barbecue wore on, a gospel playlist crackling through a portable speaker, the air thick with barbecue smoke and bug spray. I gathered empty plates, stacking them by the garden hose, my movements mechanical. The joy I'd felt giving Theo the tractor had curdled, replaced by a quiet dread I couldn't name. As I wiped a table near the kitchen window, left open to catch a breeze, voices drifted out, Nina's, low and deliberate. "The tractor's a good touch," she said, her tone clipped. "Keeps her busy while we wrap up the will." Theo's voice followed, calm and certain. "She won't dig into it, trust me." My hands froze on the tablecloth, my pulse hammering. The tractor wasn't a gift, it was a distraction, a pawn in a game I hadn't seen unfolding. I kept moving, carrying dishes inside, my expression unchanged. In the kitchen, I noticed my cobbler barely touched, pushed aside for store-bought cookies, a small slight that cut deeper than it should. I didn't pause, didn't let the sting show. I drove home in my rattling sedan, the Arkansas night thick and starless. My house was simple, its brick faded but paid off, a testament to years of scraping by. I poured a glass of iced tea I didn't drink and opened the tin box in my bedroom, where I kept my most precious papers, my marriage certificate, Theo's baptism record, and the will naming him heir to my grandmother's 5-acre farm outside town. My fingers searched, but the will was gone, its absence a wound now confirmed. I sat on the bed, the glass sweating in my hand, and knew this was no mistake. It was a theft, and I was already ensnared. The night after the barbecue, Sleep eluded me, Nina's words looping in my mind like a relentless refrain. The tractor's a good touch. They burned, each echo chipping away at the faith I'd held in Theo. I sat in my little rock living room, the clock ticking past 2 a.m., the iced tea I'd poured hours earlier untouched on the side table. My home, with its faded brick and shelves of hymnals, felt like a hollow shell, its walls unable to contain my growing unease. The missing will from my tin box haunted me, its absence of theft I couldn't yet prove, but felt in every breath. By 4 a.m., I gave up on rest, shuffled to the kitchen in my worn slippers, and pulled out a notebook I used for choir schedules. I wrote down everything I'd overheard: Nina's plan, Theo's assurance, the date, August 12th, 2024, a record of deceit I swore to unravel. At 6 a.m., I called the Pulaski County Recorder's office, my voice steady despite the shake in my hands. The clerk, her tone brisk from early morning routine, asked for the farm's address, 5 acres where my grandmother had tended cotton under an unforgiving sun. I provided it, my words careful, and she typed, then paused. The property was transferred May 15th to Green Horizon, LLC, she said. My heart sank. Who signed it? I asked. She read my name, Lillian Brown, notarized by Sheila Tate, my niece. I thanked her, hung up, and sat at the kitchen table, the notebook open, my chest tight. Sheila, who I'd only seen at weddings, who always chased quick deals, had been pulled into this, her stamp sealing my loss. I stared at the tin box, its lid still ajar from my desperate search, and my mind drifted to March. I'd been in the hospital, my heart faltering with arrhythmia, my body drained, my thoughts foggy from medication. Theo had visited, his smile warm but hurried, carrying a folder of papers. Just insurance forms, Ma, he'd said, handing me a pen. Sign these. It's for your coverage. I'd trusted him, my only son, and scrawled my name, my hand trembling, my vision blurred. The memory stung now, a betrayal laid bare. Those weren't insurance forms, they were the will, slipped in when I was too weak to question, my signature stolen under the guise of care. I dialed Sheila, my grip firm on the phone. She answered after 4 rings, her voice cautious. Aunt Lillian, been a while, she said, too cheerful. I didn't mince words. You notarized a transfer of my farm, Sheila. I was in the hospital, half out of my mind, and you let Theo use you. She stammered, her excuses thin. Theo said it was your idea. Some tax thing. I got a small fee, that's all. I cut her off, my voice sharp. You knew I was sick, and you didn't call me. You sold out family. She mumbled an apology, but I ended the call, my anger a quiet fire, driving me forward. By noon, Marta was at my door, her arms full of choir music and a fierce look in her eyes. We'd sung together in the church choir for 30 years, her alto balancing my soprano. I told her everything: Theo's serving jab, the conversation by the window, the missing will, Sheila's role. She sat at my table, sifting through the box's remaining papers, deeds, tax stubs, a photo of my grandmother with her cotton bales. They forged your will, she asked, her voice low. I nodded, the hospital memory raw. They waited until I couldn't fight. Marta's jaw tightened. We'll fix this, Lillian. They don't know you. She opened her laptop, and we searched Arkansas's business registry. Green Horizon was filed in April, its sole officer listed as Nina Wells. The audacity of it hit me. Nina hadn't even bothered to mask her name. The tractor, all $18,000 of it, wasn't a gift. It was a decoy, meant to blind me to their theft of my grandmother's farm. Marta saved the filing, her fingers quick as we built a trail of evidence. I added to my notebook the clerk's confirmation, Sheila's admission, the LLC's date, each piece a step toward reclaiming what was mine. Theo texted that afternoon, his tone light. Dinner Friday? I stared at the message, my resolve hardening, and replied, Come on over. The words were a shield, hiding the battle I was readying. I spent the evening alone, the house quiet except for the creak of the porch swing outside. I thought of my grandmother, her hands calloused from picking cotton, her voice promising the farm would stay ours. Those 5 acres weren't just land. They were her struggle, my anchor, the root I'd held through loss. Theo and Nina thought they could take it, betting on my love, my age, my trust. But they didn't know the woman who'd raised a son alone, paid off a house on a seamstress's wages, and saved for years to fuel his dream. I closed my notebook, my determination a steady flame. This was a fight, and I was built for it. The betrayal uncovered by Nina's words fueled 3 days of meticulous planning in my Little Rock home, each moment sharpening my resolve as I prepared to expose Theo's deceit. I masked my fury with warm replies to his texts, playing the unsuspecting mother while my heart burned. My house, with its faded brick and creaking floors, became a command center. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by scattered papers, insurance forms, old deeds, my notebook now a ledger of Theo and Nina's treachery. I combed through emails from Nina, searching for traces of the forged will, but found only cryptic invoices labeled administrative fees, their vagueness a likely cover for the stolen document. Each fruitless search steeled my determination to build an unassailable case. Marta arranged a call with Clarence, a real estate lawyer from her choir group, and I spoke to him the first afternoon. I recounted the hospital visit, Theo's stack of papers, and my medicated signature, my voice calm despite the memory's sting. A signature during illness or coercion is fraud, Clarence said, his tone steady but encouraging. With proof of intent, Lillian, we can void the transfer. His words grounded me, turning my pain into a strategy. I spent hours collecting evidence, the Green Horizon registration naming Nina as owner, screenshots of Nina's social media posts boasting about a green empire, and a timeline linking my hospital stay to the farm's transfer pieced together from county records and medical bills. Each piece was a thread in the net I was weaving, tight and inescapable. Marta visited the second night, her eyes blazing as she handed me a flash drive. She'd found a voicemail Theo had sent Nina, mistakenly copied to her in a group message. She played it and Theo's voice filled my kitchen, cool and calculated. Once she signs the rest, the farm's ours. Nina, you'll tie it up clean. Nina's laugh followed, sharp and confident. I gripped the counter, their voices confirming every suspicion. This was no error. It was a deliberate theft, my trust their currency. Marta saved the file, her hands precise. This is your ace, Lillian. They can't outrun this. The voicemail was my strongest weapon, a truth they couldn't deny. The evidence transformed my anger into focus, a blade honed for justice. I ordered 3 hidden cameras online, their lenses small but sharp, equipped with audio and motion sensors. Marta helped me install them in the living room, her fingers steady as she hid one in a potted plant, another in the chandelier's base, and the third behind a framed painting. We tested the feeds on her laptop, the angles capturing the dining table fully. No shadows to hide in. The cameras were my silent allies, ready to record the confrontation I was orchestrating. I scheduled the dinner for Friday, texting Theo, Claire, and Nina, family night like old times. Theo replied with a quick can't wait and a smiley face. Nina and Claire agreed curtly, their responses locking them into my trap. I rearranged the living room, shifting the table so Theo, Nina, and Claire would face me, their backs to the wall, no easy escape. I added chairs for Marta, my unwavering partner, and one left empty, a subtle pressure to unsettle them. The evidence, printouts, screenshots, the voicemail transcript went into my old cookbook, its worn pages of fitting safe on the living room shelf. I spent evenings rehearsing my speech in front of the bathroom mirror, my reflection fierce as I practiced. You stole my farm. You used my weakness. You're done. I pictured Theo's forced grin, Nina's defiant stare, Claire's nervous glance, and felt my strength solidify. This was about reclaiming my grandmother's legacy, not just settling a score. The night before the dinner, I sat in my armchair, the house dark except for a single lamp. I held a photo of my grandmother, her hands rough from cotton fields, her smile wide as she deeded the farm to me. Those 5 acres were more than land. They were her endurance, my foundation, the root Theo and Nina thought they could sever. They'd counted on my age, my love for my son, my silence, but they'd misjudged me. I tucked the photo into my notebook beside the growing list of their lies and closed it. Friday's dinner would be my reckoning, my chance to turn their betrayal into their defeat, and I was ready to strike. The Friday of the dinner arrived, and I spent the morning scrubbing my little rock home until every surface shone, not to welcome guests, but to ensure my truth would land in a space free of distraction. I was setting a trap, not a reunion. I spread my grandmother's lace tablecloth over the dining table, its intricate patterns a quiet rebellion, and set 6 places, one for me at the head, one each for Theo, Claire, and Nina facing me, one for Marta beside me, and an empty chair to keep them off balance. The hidden cameras in the potted plant, chandelier, and painting hummed softly, their feeds live. A small audio recorder, nestled in a pot of violets at the table's center, captured every sound. I cooked a meal that could have been love: fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, green beans, served as if family still held meaning, though I knew my words would burn it all down. Theo arrived first, just after 6, his crisp shirt betraying his usual jeans, his smile tight, like he sensed the air was too still. He hugged me briefly, his hey, ma too breezy, and glanced at the table, his eyes lingering on the empty chair. Nina swept in next, a bottle of bourbon in hand, her laughter loud and forced, her tailored jacket out of place in my modest home. Claire followed, her perfume sharp, her eyes glued to her phone, barely acknowledging me. I greeted them with a warm smile, took their coats, poured sweet tea, and kept the conversation light. Arkansas's heat, a new diner downtown. My voice steady despite the fire in my chest. Marta arrived, her presence a quiet strength, her nod confirming our plan was in motion. We sat, the table a battlefield beneath the guise of hospitality. I raised a glass to togetherness, the words sour in my mouth, and we clinked, their smiles thin, like they felt the weight of the empty seat. The first half hour was strained, filled with polite compliments on the chicken and vague talk about traffic. Nina pivoted to farm plans, her voice slick, like she was pitching investors. Theo nodded, his eyes on Nina, while Claire scrolled her phone, her fork idle. I sipped my tea, letting the bourbon loosen their tongues, watching their defenses slip with each sip. The violets in the pot stood bright, their scent mingling with the tension. Midway through the meal, when the plates were still half full, I set my napkin down and smiled, my pulse even, my resolve ironclad. Before we get to the cobbler, I said, my tone calm but firm, there's something we need to settle. Theo's chuckle was nervous, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Nina tilted her head, her lips pursed. Claire looked up from her phone, startled. I stood, walked to the shelf, and pulled my old cookbook from its place, its worn cover warm in my hands. From its pages, I retrieved 3 manila envelopes, each labeled with their names in my careful script. I handed one to Theo, one to Nina, one to Claire, my movements slow and deliberate. Open them, I said, returning to my seat, my hands folded. They hesitated, exchanging glances, then tore into the envelopes. Their expressions shifted as they pulled out the contents: the Green Horizon registration, screenshots of Nina's Green Empire posts, a transcript of Theo's voicemail, hospital bills for my arrhythmia, and notarization records bearing Sheila's name. Theo's hands tightened on the papers, his jaw clenched. Nina's eyes narrowed, her breath sharp. Claire's phone slipped to the table, her fingers trembling. I looked at Theo, my voice low but unwavering. You stole my grandmother's farm. You used my illness, my trust, to forge my signature. You planned it, and it's all here. Every lie, every move. Nina reacted first, her voice cutting. This proves nothing, Lillian. Just papers. I held Theo's gaze, ignoring her. You got Sheila to notarize it, Nina to bury it, and thought a tractor would keep me blind. You bet on me being too old, too soft to notice. But I did, and these cameras caught you tonight. I reached into my apron pocket, pulled out a flash drive in a clear case, and set it beside the violets. This has everything. Your words, your faces, your guilt. Stop me, and everyone sees who you are. The room went still, the air thick with their defeat. Theo clutched his envelope, his eyes wide, his mouth open but silent. Nina's hands gripped her papers, her knuckles pale, Her defiance crumbled. Claire stared at the flash drive, her head bowed, her silence a confession. The food sat cold, the bourbon untouched. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor. "This is the last time you sit here as family," I said, my voice final. "You're done." I walked out of the living room, leaving them with their envelopes, their lies laid bare. The camera is still recording. The quiet that followed was mine, a victory carved from their betrayal. The silence that followed my departure from the living room hung heavy in my Little Rock home, as if the air itself held its breath after the truth I'd unleashed. I didn't return to clear the dishes or serve the peach cobbler waiting in the fridge. Instead, I retreated to my bedroom, closed the door, and opened Marta's laptop, her anonymous account already logged in. My hands were steady as I uploaded the video we'd edited the night before, a raw cut that stripped away their pretense. Theo serving jab at the barbecue, Nina's voicemail plotting to tie it up clean, their stunned silence at the dinner table, and my voice, unwavering. "You are no longer my son." I added no text, no flourishes, just the bare reality. I clicked publish, the upload bar inching forward, and shut the laptop. The night was still, the hum of a distant car the only sound. But I felt a shift, like a weight I'd carried for years had finally cracked. By morning, the video had thousands of views, the numbers surging as I sipped coffee and checked Marta's phone, tied to the account. Notifications poured in, shares, comments, reactions, a wave I hadn't expected. By evening, it crossed 60,000, spreading across social media like a brush fire through Arkansas's dry fields. Marta called, her voice a mix of shock and pride. "Lillian, it's on Channel 5. They're calling it a fraud expose." I turned on the TV, and there it was, a headline blaring. "Little Rock Mother Unmasked Son's Farm Theft in Viral Video." The anchor outlined the deception, the dinner, my evidence, her tone gripping but factual. I muted the broadcast, my coffee cooling in my hands, and watched the views hit 90,000. The world had heard, and Theo's carefully curated startup image was collapsing. The consequences came fast. Theo and Nina's farming startup, a venture built on sleek branding and crowdfunding, sank under a flood of scathing reviews, backers labeling them crooks and opportunists. Their website buckled under the traffic, its contact form disabled. Nina's business license was suspended. A state inquiry launched after someone sent the video with the Green Horizon filings. Claire vanished from sight, her social media accounts gone, her phone number disconnected, as if she'd erased herself from the narrative. I didn't follow their downfall, didn't scour posts or ask choir friends for updates. Their ruin was their own, a harvest of the lies they'd planted. My focus was on the legal battle to reclaim my grandmother's farm, guided by Clarence, my lawyer, whose steady counsel kept me grounded. A letter arrived from Clarence 5 days later, its pages formal and precise. Theo's inheritance rights were nullified. A fraud complaint was filed with the county, and the forge will was overturned, my grandmother's 5 acres restored to my name. The updated deed was en route, a document I'd hold like a vow. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter open, the new deed beside it, and felt no rush of victory, only a quiet resolve, like a field settling after a storm. The farm wasn't just land, it was my grandmother's labor, my family's root, and I'd fought to keep it mine. Theo texted that afternoon, his message short, "Call me Ma." I was dumb. I read it, my finger hovering over the screen, then deleted it without a reply. His regret, if genuine, was too late, a shadow of his choices. My mailbox began to fill with letters from strangers, their words a mix of admiration and shared grief. Some called me a trailblazer. Others shared their own wounds. One woman wrote of her daughter selling her home while she was in hospice, her letter raw with sorrow but firm with hope. "Your fight woke me up," she said. I read her words, my throat tight, and realized my struggle had become a beacon for others carrying similar scars. Marta visited that evening, her smile wide as she taped the best online comments to my fridge like medals. "Legend," one read. "She's unstoppable," said another. We laughed, the sound easing the ache in my chest, but beneath it, I felt a deeper truth. The win wasn't in the views or the headlines. It was in the farm, now mine again, and the silence I'd broken. I walked to my bedroom, opened my tin box, and pulled out the photo of my grandmother, her hands worn from cotton fields, her eyes bright with pride when she deeded the farm to me. I traced her face, whispering, "It's ours again." The legal fight was won, the deed secure, but the peace I felt was my own, a quiet power forged in the crucible of betrayal. 6 months after the video shook Little Rock, I moved onto my grandmother's 5-acre farm, into a modest house I'd built with the last of my savings. Marta helped me settle in, her laughter bright as we painted the walls a sunny yellow, gospel hymns flowing from an old radio, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the Arkansas breeze. The house was small, its porch narrow but sturdy, its windows catching the dawn's light. It was mine, reclaimed from Theo's betrayal, a piece of the land my grandmother had worked until her final days. We hung curtains Marta had sewn, their soft linen fluttering gently, and unpacked my hymnals, a chipped teapot, and a quilt my mother had made, each item rooting me to this new beginning. I turned the old barn out back into a haven for women like me, betrayed, wounded by those they'd raised. I named it Sprouts, a word that held the promise of growth from cracked earth. I didn't advertise, just shared the news through choir friends, and soon 4 women arrived. Rose, whose son had forged her checks. Ella, left penniless by a daughter scam. Joy, whose children had sold her car. And Vivian, abandoned by her family, moved in, their bags light but their spirits unbowed. They tended the small garden we planted, sowing corn and zucchini, their hands steady in the soil, their quiet stories filling the barn with life. Sprouts wasn't just a shelter, it was a place to rebuild, and I felt its purpose in my bones. One morning, a courier dropped an envelope by the gate, no sender listed. Inside were the keys to the John Deere tractor I'd given Theo, their metal worn, and a note in his handwriting, left it at the fence. Saudi. I didn't check if the tractor was there, didn't care if it rusted in the sun. Instead, I walked to the barn, found a piece of scrap wood, and etched words into it with a carving knife. She was more than a mother. I hung it on the porch, the keys nailed beside it, a quiet monument to what I'd endured. Rose saw it first, her eyes lingering, but she didn't ask and I didn't explain. The sign spoke for itself. Every dawn, I watered the cotton plants my grandmother had grown, my fingers brushing their leaves, whispering to the farm that it was safe. The ritual anchored me, a pledge that no one would steal this land again. Letters kept arriving, tucked into my mailbox or sent through Marta's anonymous account. Strangers thanked me for the video, for voicing their pain. One woman wrote of her daughter selling her home during her hospice stay, her words heavy with grief but laced with determination. "You gave me strength," she said. I replied, "My pen's steady. Rise from the ruins. You're tougher than you know." Their stories wove into mine, a tapestry of resilience, and I stored their letters in a box beside my grandmother's photo, their weight a silent power. Theo appeared one afternoon, his knock faint against the new door. I saw him through the window, his face drawn, his jacket frayed at the cuffs. I paused, my hand on the knob, torn between shutting him out and needing to see if any trace of my son remained. I opened the door, stepping back, and he entered, his eyes scanning the yellow walls like a stranger. "Ma," he said, his voice cracked. I offered water, not warmth, and we sat at the kitchen table, the silence heavy. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, tears falling, his hands clasped tight. Nina pushed, and I thought the farm would save the startup. I was wrong. I listened, my face still, as he poured out apologies, each one a bid for forgiveness. When he finished, I looked at him, my voice calm but firm. "You didn't hurt me, Theo. You chose to steal, to lie, to break me. You thought I was too old to stand, but you were wrong." His eyes searched mine, pleading for a crack in my resolve, but I had none to offer. "I don't hate you," I said, "but you're not my son anymore. You're a stranger and I owe you nothing." He nodded, his shoulders slumping, and I stood, opening the door. As he passed, I didn't reach for him, didn't falter. I closed it, leaned against the wood, and felt a peace settle, deep and unshaken. I returned to the kitchen, the water glass untouched, and looked out at the garden, where Vivian was harvesting zucchini, her hum carrying on the breeze. The farm was mine, its deed clean, its soil a witness to my fight. I stepped outside, the Arkansas dusk warm, and touched the cotton plants, their leaves soft against my fingers. My name, Lillian Brown, was back on the land, back on my life, and I was whole. Not because the world had seen my story, but because I'd chosen to tell it.